In the biting grip of an Alaskan winter, the world beyond Logan Hayes's cabin was a frozen wasteland, a vast expanse of white broken only by the skeletal silhouettes of spruce trees bowed under the weight of ice. Logan, a man carved from years of military discipline and solitude, moved through the snow with deliberate ease. His breath rose in small clouds, the cold biting through the layers of his worn jacket and insulated gloves. The wilderness had become both his refuge and his prison since he'd left behind the chaos of his former life as a Navy SEAL. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me, have you ever encountered an unexpected friendship in the wild? Where did it happen? The sky hung heavy with steel-gray clouds, threatening the next storm. Logan's boots crunched softly against the snow, the only sound amid the eerie stillness that blanketed the landscape. He was following a narrow trail that meandered along the edge of a frozen creek, his eyes scanning for signs of life in a place where survival was a daily battle. His instincts, honed by years in hostile environments, told him that this was no ordinary trek. Ahead, nestled among a cluster of frost-laden pines, something unusual caught his eye, a small cabin, its silhouette barely visible beneath a thick layer of snow and ice. It stood isolated, a solitary structure in a sea of white, its wooden frame weathered and worn. But what arrested Logan's attention most was a dog, a large, muscular animal with a thick coat of russet fur, standing rigidly on guard just outside the cabin's door. The dog's posture was tense, its ears pricked forward, eyes sharp and alert. Yet it did not flee when Logan approached. Instead, it growled low and steady, a warning rather than a threat. Logan slowed his pace, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The dog's gaze never wavered, a silent sentinel protecting something precious within the cabin's frozen walls. Logan's curiosity was piqued. He knew the harshness of the wilderness could breed strange alliances, and the presence of the dog here suggested more than mere coincidence. The cabin's door was sealed shut, encased in a thick layer of ice that glistened under the fading daylight. Whoever had been here had taken great care to barricade themselves inside, or to keep others out. He circled the cabin, noting the deep impressions in the snow. Footprints, perhaps, too faint to follow, but fresh enough to suggest recent activity. The wind tugged at his jacket, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke and something else. Something faintly medicinal or chemical, indistinct but troubling. Logan knelt beside the dog, who regarded him with wary intelligence. The animal's eyes held a glimmer of trust despite its caution. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small piece of dried meat, which he offered slowly. The dog sniffed, hesitated, then accepted the offering, the growl fading to a low rumble of acceptance. This was no ordinary wild animal. It was guarding the cabin for a reason. His fingers traced the frozen edges of the door, feeling the chill that radiated through the thick wood. The lock was buried beneath ice, rusted but intact. Logan's breath fogged in the cold air as he assessed his options. He wasn't one to leave questions unanswered, especially in a place as unforgiving as this. The wilderness was unforgiving, and secrets were often buried beneath layers of ice and silence. Logan had come seeking peace, but here, at the edge of the world, the past had a way of creeping back. The dog, steadfast and vigilant, was a beacon in the cold desolation, a sign that something, or someone, needed protection. As twilight deepened, the sky darkening to a deep indigo, the dog shifted its weight, tail flicking with restless energy. Logan's gaze returned to the cabin, a quiet resolve settling over him. The frozen door stood between him and whatever lay within, a mystery wrapped in frost, waiting to be uncovered. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it a promise of storms to come, and with them, perhaps, answers that would challenge the fragile peace Logan had sought in this remote wilderness. For now, the dog remained by his side, a silent guardian in the encroaching night. And Logan prepared to face whatever secrets the cabin held, knowing that in this frozen frontier, survival was as much about trust as it was about strength. The dog remained planted just beyond the cabin's threshold, eyes fixed on Logan with a cautious curiosity that neither encouraged nor forbade his approach. Logan took a slow breath, the cold air biting at his lungs, and stepped closer to the frozen door. The ice that encased it was thick, like a translucent wall forged by the relentless Alaskan winter. And frost crystals sparkled dimly in the fading light. He ran his gloved fingers over the surface, feeling the rough texture beneath, the cold seeping into his skin despite the layers. The dog shifted, a low growl rising from its throat, not quite a warning, but a reminder of its watchful role. Logan met its gaze steadily, his voice soft and even. "I don't mean you harm." He crouched low, eyes scanning the perimeter for any hidden dangers. The wilderness was merciless, but it was also a place where trust had to be earned, not demanded. He circled the cabin once more, searching for any signs of entry beyond the frozen door. Snow drifts piled high around the foundation, undisturbed except for the faint tracks leading to the dog's post. There were no footprints suggesting someone had come or gone recently, only the dog's steady patrol. Logan's mind unraveled the possibilities. Had the occupants sealed themselves inside? Or was the cabin abandoned, left to the mercy of the elements and this lone sentinel? A flicker of movement caught his eye. A shadow shifting behind the frost-covered window, stepped closer, pressing a gloved hand against the glass. It was opaque with ice, but through the haze, he could make out the dim outline of objects inside. A table, a stack of crates, something metallic glinting faintly. The cabin was far from deserted. Someone had been here recently. Logan's curiosity deepened, mixing with a gnawing concern. The dog's presence was no accident. It was guarding the cabin for a reason. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small metal tool, a multi-purpose knife he always carried. With careful, practiced movements, he chipped away at the ice sealing the lock. The sharp crack of breaking frost echoed softly in the still air, the sound swallowed quickly by the vast silence. The lock yielded, rusted but functional. Logan eased the door open, a rush of cold air spilling out, carrying the scent of wood smoke mixed with something faintly medicinal. The dog slipped in immediately, its body tense but unafraid, weaving between his legs as if to guide him. Inside, the cabin was cramped but orderly. A small stove sat in the corner, its embers still warm, casting flickering shadows against the rough-hewn walls. A few blankets lay folded on a wooden cot, and a table cluttered with supplies. Jars of preserved food, a battered stovepot, and scattered papers yellowed with age. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something metallic, a faint chemical tang that Logan couldn't place. The dog padded silently ahead, stopping at a makeshift shelf where a small radio sat, its antenna bent but intact. Logan's eyes scanned the room, noting signs of recent habitation. A half-empty water bottle, a worn pair of gloves, footprints in the thin dust that coated the floorboards beneath the snow tracked in through the cracked door. He knelt, picking up a folded piece of paper from the table. It was a hastily scrawled note, the ink smudged but legible. If found, please protect. Research critical. Danger close. The word sent a chill through Logan that wasn't from the cold. This cabin wasn't just a shelter. It was a sanctuary, a vault for something valuable, something worth guarding. The dog growled softly, alert to a noise outside, a distant crack of a branch, the whisper of movement in the snow. Logan rose, moving to peer through the frosted window again. The forest beyond was darkening rapidly, the last light fading beneath a thickening cloud cover. Whoever had left the note and the cabin's guardian behind was still out there, somewhere in the shadowed wilderness. Logan's mind raced. The wilderness was no stranger to danger, but this felt different. The note hinted at secrets worth protecting, and the dog's vigilance underscored the seriousness of the threat. He glanced back at the animal, now settled near the stove, eyes never fully resting. He moved to the cot, gently lifting a corner of a blanket. Beneath it lay a small, leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and worn. Logan opened it, carefully, flipping through pages filled with cramped handwriting, sketches of wildlife, notes on temperature readings, and detailed observations of the local ecosystem. The entries spoke of a scientist, someone who had been here, studying the fragile balance of the Alaskan wilderness and the ominous changes creeping in with the shifting climate. The journal also hinted at threats, mentions of unknown parties, shadowy figures who wanted the research silenced. Logan's gut tightened. This wasn't just a cabin lost to the snow. It was a battleground for knowledge and perhaps survival. A soft whine drew his attention to the dog, who stood now by the door, ears perked, muscles taut. Logan followed its gaze to the window again. Movement. A figure, dark and fleeting, slipping between the trees. Whoever they were, they had come for the cabin, and they weren't alone. Logan's military training kicked in. He assessed the cabin's defenses, the narrow windows, the single door, and the thick walls. He needed to protect whatever was inside until he could uncover the full story. And maybe, just maybe, find the person who had left this place in such a desperate state. He reached into his pack for a flashlight, illuminating the journal one more time before closing it carefully. The dog settled beside him, a silent companion in the growing darkness. Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying with it the promise of a storm and the shadowy threat lurking just beyond the tree line. Logan's breath was steady as he moved toward the door, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. The dog's low growl was a reminder. This was no place for hesitation. The frozen cabin held secrets that demanded answers, and Logan was the one who had stumbled into their midst. Now, there was no turning back. The cabin's interior was dim, the glow from the dying embers of the stove casting long shadows that danced across the rough wooden walls. Logan moved deliberately, every step measured as he began a careful search, his eyes scanning for clues, anything to reveal the occupant's identity or purpose. The dog, now more companion than guard, padded silently beside him, alert to every sound beyond the fragile walls. Logan's fingers brushed over a stack of worn blankets folded neatly on the cot. The fabric was threadbare but clean, suggesting someone had been here not long ago. He lifted a small, battered metal box from beneath the bed, its surface scratched and dulled by time. Inside, a jumble of items, old photographs, a cracked compass, and a few hastily scribbled notes, hinted at a life interrupted. He unfolded one of the notes, the handwriting hurried but precise. "Keep the research safe. Trust no one." The words struck a chord, echoing the urgency he'd felt since stumbling upon this place. Logan's gaze drifted back to the window, where the faint outline of a figure had slipped through the trees. Whoever they were, they weren't just curious. This was a pursuit. The dog stopped near the door, ears twitching toward a distant crackling sound outside. Logan's military instincts sharpened. The wilderness was no longer a silent expanse, but a stage for an unseen threat. He moved toward the small table cluttered with supplies, a half-used candle, a weathered map marked with strange symbols, and a nearly empty jar of preserved berries. The map caught his attention. It was detailed, with annotations about wildlife migration patterns and environmental anomalies. Evidence that the occupant was deeply connected to this land. Suddenly, a faint noise outside. A twig snapping underfoot made both man and dog freeze. Logan's hand instinctively went to the pocket of his jacket, fingers closing around the cold metal of his multi-tool. He crouched low, peering through the frosted window. The shadowy figure had vanished, swallowed by the thickening dusk and the dense forest beyond. Inside the cabin, the warmth from the stove was fading fast. Logan knelt before it, stoking the embers with a scrap of dry wood found beneath the floorboards. The glow returned, casting a soft light that illuminated the room's sparse furnishings. He noticed a small pack tucked away in the corner, partially concealed beneath a tattered tarp. Pulling it out, he found a collection of scientific equipment: vials, a portable thermometer, and several notebooks filled with meticulous data. The dog sniffed at the pack, then whined softly, as if urging Logan to hurry. The urgency was contagious. Logan could feel the tension coiling tighter with every passing moment. He flipped open one of the notebooks, revealing detailed observations about the local ecosystem and warnings about rapid environmental changes: melting permafrost, dwindling animal populations, and shifting weather patterns. Each page painted a picture of a scientist deeply committed to their work, yet increasingly fearful of the consequences. The entries grew more frantic toward the end, mentioning threats from unknown entities intent on silencing the research. Logan's pulse quickened. This was no mere cabin lost to the wilderness. It was a fortress of secrets, and he was now a reluctant guardian. A sudden gust rattled the cabin's fragile window panes, sending a shiver through the room. The dog growled low, ears flat against its head. Logan moved toward the door, checking the lock he'd pried free earlier. The ice had begun to melt slightly, threatening to refreeze and trap them inside. He needed to act quickly. Outside, the wind carried the faint murmur of voices. Too distant to make out, but close enough to signal pursuit. Logan's mind raced through options. The cabin was defensible, but isolated. He couldn't face whatever was coming alone, not without understanding the stakes. He pocketed the notebooks and secured the scientific gear into his pack. The dog followed, tail low but steady, a silent partner in the unfolding mystery. Logan paused by the stove, taking a last look at the scattered papers and equipment. There was no time to decipher every detail now. The priority was survival and protection. Stepping outside, the cold hit him like a wall, the snow crunching underfoot as he scanned the tree line. The forest was a shifting labyrinth of shadows and whispers, the approaching storm muffling sounds and blurring shapes. The dog's keen senses were his best advantage here. Logan set off along the narrow trail beside the creek, moving swiftly but cautiously. His breath came in steady puffs, the cold biting at his face, but his focus was unyielding. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated to avoid detection. The dog led the way, nose to the ground, following a scent that Logan couldn't yet perceive. The sense of urgency was palpable. They were not alone, and the wilderness, once a sanctuary, had become a hunting ground. Logan's mind replayed the fragments of notes and observations, warnings of danger, pleas for protection. The scientist's research was valuable, perhaps vital, and someone was willing to go to great lengths to keep it hidden. As the sky darkened further, the first flakes of snow began to fall, softening the landscape and muffling their footsteps. Logan welcomed the cover, knowing it bought them precious time. The dog paused, ears twitching, then darted off the trail into a thicket. Logan followed, pushing through the dense brush until they reached a small clearing, shielded from the open woods. He knelt, pulling the journal from his pack again, flipping to the last entries. The scientist's words were desperate yet resolute, a testament to their commitment and fear. Logan felt a kinship with this unknown figure, a stranger bound by duty to protect what mattered in a world growing colder and more dangerous. The dog settled beside him, a steady presence in the swirling snow. Logan's hand rested on its thick fur, drawing strength from the silent bond. Beyond the clearing, shadows moved, figures closing in, intent on finding what had been hidden away. Logan's jaw tightened. The search was far from over. But for now, in this frozen wilderness, he and the dog had found a fragile foothold, a moment to prepare, to understand, and to fight for the truth buried beneath the ice. The journal lay open on Logan's knees, its fragile pages whispering secrets of a life lived on the edge of discovery and danger. Each line of cramped handwriting told a story, but it was the latter entries that drew his eyes deeper into the mystery. The cabin's occupant was no ordinary wanderer. They were a scientist, a researcher who had vanished into the wilderness while chasing truths that others desperately wanted to bury. Logan's breath steamed in the cold air as he traced the words with his gloved fingers. The entries detailed a painstaking study of climate change's effects on the Alaskan ecosystem. Melting permafrost, shifting animal, migrations, and the delicate balance of life that teetered on the brink. But beneath the scientific observations was a growing unease, a warning of forces beyond nature threatening to silence the work. The scientist wrote of shadowy figures lurking at the edges of their field studies, of equipment sabotaged, and of threats whispered in the dark. There was a palpable fear woven through the pages, but also resolve, a determination to protect the research, no matter the cost. Logan felt the weight of that burden settle on his shoulders. This was why the dog had guarded the cabin so fiercely. It was a living shield for something invaluable. The dog shifted beside him, tail flicking in restless anticipation. Logan scanned the surrounding trees, their skeletal branches clawing at the gray sky. The wind carried a faint scent, smoke, perhaps, or something chemical, that confirmed the threats were not just imagined. They were real and closing in. A sudden crack in the underbrush snapped Logan's attention to the present. He rose cautiously, the journal tucked safely into his pack, and moved toward the source. The dog followed, muscles coiled, senses alert. Hidden behind a fallen log was a small, weathered box, partially buried in snow. Logan knelt, brushing away the frost to reveal a hand-carved emblem etched into the wood, a symbol matching the sketches in the journal. Inside the box lay a collection of microfilm canisters and a small sealed envelope. The envelope's flap bore a handwritten note: "For protection, do not lose." Logan's fingers trembled slightly as he broke the seal, revealing photographs and documents, images of melting glaciers, tagged wildlife, and maps marked with clandestine research sites. This was the core of the scientist's work, the tangible proof of environmental changes that could alter the world. Logan's mind raced. Whoever these shadowy figures were, they sought to erase this evidence, to bury the truth beneath layers of snow and silence. The dog growled low, ears pricked toward the distant tree line, where movement stirred among the shadows. Suddenly, a faint whistle carried on the wind sharp and deliberate, a signal. Logan's heart pounded. They were not alone. The wilderness was no longer a sanctuary, but a battleground. He gathered the box and slipped it into his pack, securing the journal alongside it. The dog pressed close, body tense but steady. Logan scanned the horizon, calculating his next move. The storm clouds thickened, the first flakes of a new snowstorm beginning to fall, blurring the edges of the forest and muffling sound. Logan decided they needed shelter and safety beyond the cabin's fragile walls. The scientists' research had to be protected. But first, they had to survive the coming night. He led the dog down the narrow trail along the frozen creek, moving swiftly but with caution. The snow deepened and the cold intensified, but Logan's resolve did not waver. As they pressed forward, the dog suddenly stopped, nose to the ground. Logan crouched beside it, noticing disturbed snow and faint footprints, signs that others had passed this way recently. The threat was closer than he had feared. The dog's growl was a low rumble, a warning that sent a shiver down Logan's spine. He scanned the trees, eyes sharp against the dimming light. Shadows shifted, fleeting and indistinct, but unmistakable. Logan's voice was a low murmur. "We're not alone. Stay close." The dog responded with a soft whine, then pressed against his side, a steadying presence in the growing darkness. Logan's mind raced through the possibilities. Who were these pursuers? Why was the scientist's work so dangerous? And most importantly, how could he protect what had been entrusted to him? They reached a narrow bend where the creek disappeared beneath a thick canopy of evergreens. Logan spotted a small cave entrance, partially obscured by snow and brush. It wasn't much, but it would provide shelter from the storm and a defensible position. He eased inside, the dog following closely. The cave was cold and damp, but it blocked the wind and muffled the sounds of the forest. Logan set his pack down, spreading a tarp and some of the blankets from the cabin over a patch of dry ground. Sitting beside the dog, Logan pulled the journal and documents from his pack once more. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. This was more than survival. It was a mission to safeguard the truth, to stand against forces determined to keep the world in ignorance. Outside, the storm began in earnest, snow swirling in fierce gusts that rattled the cave's mouth. Logan's gaze settled on the dog, whose steady eyes reflected the same quiet determination. In this frozen wilderness, surrounded by shadows and secrets, an unspoken alliance had been forged between a man, a dog, and a mission far greater than either could have anticipated. The night was long, and the path ahead uncertain. But Logan knew one thing. The fight to protect the cabin's secrets had only just begun. The storm outside howled like a wild beast, snow slamming against the cave's entrance with relentless fury. Inside, the dim light of a small fire Logan had coaxed to life flickered against the damp rock walls, casting long shadows that danced in the corners. The dog lay close by, muscles coiled but restless, ears twitching at every distant crack and rustle beyond the stone shelter. Logan's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of the scientist's journal and the evidence they'd uncovered. The research was more than academic. It was a lifeline to understanding the fragile balance of this wilderness, a warning of catastrophic change. But now, unknown pursuers lurked in the storm's shadow, determined to snatch away this truth and bury it beneath the ice forever. A sudden scraping noise echoed faintly from outside the cave. Logan's heart tightened. Someone was closing in. He moved to the entrance, peering cautiously through a narrow crevice between rocks. The swirling snow blurred the forest beyond, but he caught glimpses of dark figures moving with purpose, their shapes indistinct but menacing. They were using the storm as cover, their footsteps muffled by the thick snowfall. The dog growled low, a warning as sharp as the wind's howl. Logan's grip tightened on the handle of his multi-tool, the cold metal a steady weight in his palm. He knew they had to prepare, not just to survive, but to defend the cabin's secrets at all costs. He retreated deeper into the cave, gathering the scattered papers, notebooks, and the box of microfilm canisters. The fire sputtered but held, casting a fragile glow over his face as he worked. Every sound outside was amplified in the stillness, the storm punctuated by the occasional snap of a tree branch or the crunch of footsteps pressing closer. Logan crouched beside the dog, whispering, "We can't let them get to this." His voice was steady, though his mind churned with possibilities. These pursuers were organized, methodical, and dangerous. Outside, the storm intensified. The wind tore through the trees, sending a cascade of snow and ice crashing to the ground. The forest was a swirling white void, hiding the movements of the threat that stalked them. Logan scanned the cave's limited exit points, considering his options. The narrow mouth of the cave was their only way out, and it could be easily blocked or ambushed. He needed a plan. The dog's ears pricked up again, and it darted to the cave's far side, alerting Logan to a faint noise. A scraping beneath the snow, the soft thud of something heavy shifting nearby. Logan's pulse quickened. They were being watched. He moved silently to a shadowed nook, pulling from his pack a lightweight emergency radio. Flicking it on, he caught static and faint, garbled voices. Signals from a ranger station miles away, possibly the only help within reach. He keyed the transmitter, voice low but urgent. "This is Logan Hayes. I've found critical research on environmental shifts in this region. I'm under threat, need immediate extraction and backup. Coordinates are approximate but accurate. Repeat, extraction needed." The radio crackled, then silence. Logan's jaw tightened. The storm was interfering, but at least the message was sent. He turned back to the dog, who now sat alert, eyes gleaming with fierce intelligence. Logan's thoughts raced. Time was running out. As the night deepened, the noise outside grew louder. Voices carried on the wind, the snap of branches as the pursuers pressed nearer. The dog paced, growled, and then suddenly bolted toward the entrance, teeth bared. Logan followed, readying himself for confrontation. A shadow loomed at the cave's mouth, a figure silhouetted against the swirling snow. Another appeared, then another. The pursuers were here. But Logan was no stranger to confrontation. Years of training surged through him as he positioned himself between the entrance and the precious cargo he carried. The dog barked fiercely, lunging forward to intercept the first intruder. Chaos erupted in the storm's heart. Logan moved with practiced precision, disabling one attacker with a swift blow before ducking beneath a wild swing from another. The dog was a blur of motion and snarls, teeth flashing as it defended its charge. The storm masked their movements, the howling wind swallowing shouts and struggle alike. Logan's focus was razor sharp. Protect the research, protect the dog, survive. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the night, a signal. The attackers faltered, regrouping swiftly before retreating into the storm's white fury. Logan's breath came hard, the adrenaline fading as the threat receded. The dog returned to his side, panting but uninjured. Logan exhaled deeply, the tension easing only slightly. The danger was real, and it was far from over. He secured the door of the cave with a makeshift barricade of fallen branches and rocks, then settled back near the fire with the dog at his feet. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a fragile calm had returned. Logan's mind was a whirl of plans and contingencies. They could not stay here long. The research had to be moved, protected, and ultimately shared with those who could make a difference. He looked down at the dog, whose steady gaze met his own, a silent promise passing between them. Together, they would face whatever came next. For now, the storm was their shield. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. The storm had spent its fury, leaving the forest cloaked in a heavy silence that pressed against the cave's entrance like an unseen weight. Logan's breath hung in the cold air, shallow and steady, as he crouched near the dying embers of the fire. The dog lay alert beside him, muscles taut, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the mouth of their refuge. Outside, the snow had softened the landscape into a muted palette of white and shadow. But Logan knew better than to trust the calm. Footsteps, deliberate and measured, crunched through the fresh snow, breaking the silence with sharp, deliberate echoes. Logan's senses snapped to full alert. The pursuers had returned, moving with purpose and precision. His hand drifted to the multi-tool at his belt, fingers tightening around the cold metal. The first figure materialized at the edge of the tree line, cloaked in dark winter gear that blended seamlessly with the shadows. Behind him, two more followed, their faces obscured by scarves and hoods. They moved in silent coordination, a practiced team well-versed in tracking and subterfuge. Logan rose slowly, motioning for the dog to stay close. He scanned the cave's interior, eyes landing on a sturdy branch he'd collected earlier, a makeshift weapon. Gripping it tightly, he stepped toward the entrance, every muscle coiled for action. As the figures approached, the dog growled low, stepping forward with a fierce snarl that reverberated through the cold air. Logan's voice cut through the tension. "Stay back. This is your only warning." The lead figure halted, raising gloved hands in a placating gesture. "We don't want to hurt you," came a calm, measured voice. "But that research, it's dangerous. We're here to retrieve it." Logan's jaw tightened. "Dangerous to who? What right do you have to decide that?" "We're protecting the greater good," the man replied, eyes hard but not unkind. "There are forces that would use this information to destabilize everything. We can't allow that." The dog barked sharply, stepping between Logan and the intruders. Logan held up his hand, signaling restraint. The standoff stretched taut, the cold biting deeper as the silence lengthened. Suddenly, a sharp whistle pierced the air, a signal from the intruders' unseen allies. More shadows slipped through the trees, flanking Logan's position. The cave was surrounded. Logan's mind raced. He had seconds to act. The dog snarled, sensing his urgency. Logan grabbed the branch, stepping forward with controlled aggression. The first attacker lunged, but Logan was ready. With a swift swing, the branch connected, sending the man sprawling into the snow. The dog leapt into the fray, teeth flashing as it engaged the second assailant. Chaos erupted in the clearing outside the cave. Logan moved with the precision of a seasoned warrior, his every strike calculated to disable without unnecessary harm. The dog was a blur of motion and fury, protecting its charge with relentless determination. The storm's aftermath muffled sounds, the falling snow absorbing shouts and struggles. Logan's breaths came hard, his focus razor-sharp as he fought to hold the line. Suddenly, the lead intruder shouted a command, and the attackers regrouped, retreating into the forest's shadows with a promise of return. Logan's grip on the branch loosened only slightly as the threat receded. The dog returned to his side, panting but vigilant. Logan scanned the darkened woods, heart pounding. The confrontation was over, for now. He gathered the scattered papers and equipment, securing them once more in his pack. The fight to protect the cabin's secrets had escalated, but Logan's resolve had not wavered. As dawn's pale light filtered through the trees, Logan and the dog prepared to move. They had to stay ahead of their pursuers, to find a way to safeguard the research beyond the frozen wilderness. Together, they vanished into the snow-covered forest, shadows among shadows, bound by a mission greater than themselves. Dawn bled pale and cold over the horizon, casting a brittle light through the skeletal branches of the Alaskan forest. Logan moved cautiously, the snow beneath his boots muffling his steps as he threaded through the dense stand of evergreens. The dog padded silently beside him, eyes sharp and alert, ears swiveling to catch every whisper of the wind. The storm's fury had passed, but the threat remained. Unseen eyes watching, footsteps tracking their every move. Logan's breath clouded in the frigid air, steady and measured despite the tension coiling tight in his chest. They had to reach help, to bring the scientists' research into safe hands before the shadowy pursuers could strike again. The weight of the journals and microfilm nestled securely in his pack was a constant reminder of the stakes. This was no longer just survival. It was a mission to protect truth itself. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, Logan spotted a narrow ridge overlooking a frozen river. He paused, scanning the ice below for signs of movement. A faint trail of footprints crossed the riverbank, recent and hurried. He knelt, brushing snow from the tracks, then followed them with his eyes toward a cluster of footprints leading away from the water's edge into a small encampment nestled among the trees. Logan's pulse quickened. This could be the scientist, or someone connected to the research. He signaled the dog to stay close, then moved quietly toward the camp, senses honed to detect any sign of danger. The camp was sparse but functional. A smoldering fire pit sent thin tendrils of smoke into the morning air. Tents made from heavy canvas flapped softly in the breeze, their sides dusted with snow. Nearby, a makeshift work table bore the marks of recent use. Papers strewn about, a portable microscope, and a half-filled thermos. Logan's heart hammered as he called softly. "Hello? Anyone here?" A figure emerged from behind a tent. An older woman, her face lined with cold and determination. Her eyes widened with cautious relief upon seeing him. "You found it," she whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "Thank God." Logan nodded, lowering his pack carefully. "I have the research, but you're not safe here. They're coming." She glanced toward the tree line, then back at him. "I know. We've been hiding, trying to stay one step ahead. But they're relentless." The woman introduced herself as Dr. Elise Marlowe, the scientist who had been conducting the research Logan had uncovered. She explained how her work had uncovered alarming shifts in the ecosystem: melting permafrost, exposing ancient pathogens, wildlife displacement, and rapid climate changes threatening the entire region. "We thought we could protect the data by staying hidden," Elise said, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "But they want to bury the truth, no matter the cost." Logan listened, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just a research project. It was a battle for survival, a fight against those who preferred ignorance over exposure. Together, they reviewed the documents, the urgency of their mission clear. Elise's team had planned to transmit the data to a global scientific coalition, but their communications had been compromised. Logan's radio message was their last hope. As the morning sun climbed higher, Logan contacted the ranger station again, sending a detailed message requesting extraction and backup. The response was delayed but hopeful. Help was on its way, though it would take time to navigate the storm-ravaged wilderness. Elise prepared to move with Logan and the dog, her determination rekindled by the promise of assistance. The fragile alliance formed in the shadow of the storm was now a beacon of hope, a chance to bring truth to light and protect a world teetering on the edge. As they packed their gear, Logan felt the weight of the mission settle into a steady resolve. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but together, they would face it. The wilderness was vast and unforgiving, but the bonds forged in its depths were unbreakable. With the dog leading the way, they set off toward an uncertain future, driven by courage, loyalty, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft glow across the frost-laden landscape of the Alaskan wilderness. Logan stood on a ridge overlooking the small town nestled in the valley below, a place that, until recently, had been just a distant speck on his solitary map. Now it represented hope, a chance to turn the tide against the shadows that had pursued him and the dog through the endless winter. Beside him, the dog sat alert, tail resting on the snow, eyes fixed on the town's edge where smoke curled lazily from chimneys. The bond between them had deepened through shared trials, silent conversations in the cold, mutual protection against unseen threats. Logan brushed a gloved hand along the dog's thick fur, drawing strength from their unspoken alliance. Behind them, the morning mist curled through the trees, and the faint sound of engines echoed from a distant road. Help was coming. The local authorities, alerted by Logan's radio transmissions and Elise's persistence, had mobilized a search and rescue team to locate and secure the scientists' research. Elise Marlowe stepped forward, her face etched with fatigue but illuminated by a renewed sense of purpose. She carried the last of her notes and equipment, her eyes scanning the town below. "It's time," she said softly. "We can finally protect this work and the truth it holds." Logan nodded, folding the journal carefully. The journey from the frozen cabin to this moment had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, but the mission was no longer solitary. The community below represented a new beginning, a chance to share the knowledge that could change the course of the future. As they descended the ridge, the dog led the way, nose to the ground, senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the environment. The town of Silver Ridge welcomed them with cautious eyes and open arms. A community scarred by winter's harshness, but resilient in spirit. Local officials quickly moved to secure the research, establishing a temporary wildlife rescue center funded by seized assets from the shadowy group that had tried to suppress the scientists' work. News spread fast, igniting conversations about conservation, climate change, and the fragile balance of nature. Elise was appointed director of the center, her expertise guiding efforts to protect the region's wildlife and restore damaged ecosystems. Logan found himself drawn into the community, his once solitary existence giving way to unexpected connections forged through shared purpose. The dog, once a lone guardian of a hidden cabin, became a symbol of loyalty and courage, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, bonds could be formed that transcended words. One evening, as the town settled into the quiet embrace of twilight, Logan stood on the porch of his cabin, overlooking the valley below. The wind carried the distant sounds of life, children playing, neighbors chatting, the soft rustle of leaves. Peace was no longer a solitary pursuit, but a shared achievement. He thought of the journey, the frozen door, the guarded cabin, the relentless pursuers, and the fragile alliance that had emerged from the snow. The resilience of the human spirit, the loyalty between man and dog, and the courage to face adversity had brought them here. Logan smiled faintly, the cold air filling his lungs. True peace, he realized, wasn't found in isolation, but in the connections forged through struggle and hope. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was filled with promise. Together, they stood, a man, a dog, and a community bound by the unyielding pursuit of truth and the enduring strength of trust. The wilderness beyond still whispered its ancient tales, but within Silver Ridge, a new chapter had begun.